Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen across our beautiful country of Canada, our friends around the world, in the known and unknown universe. Welcome back to your favorite Angry Canadian on the 27th day of October 2023. And I really gotta wonder, how is it with all the brilliant people that have been and are still living, that we manage, and I'm just not just saying it about Canada. I mean, take a look at the U.S. below us. How is it that these stupid, useless people end up running the countries? I mean, what the hell is wrong with people? Why can't they friggin' see it? So, I'm listening to Paul Harvey, 1965 and on. The guy knew what was happening back then, but he could also foresee the way the future was gonna be. What the hell do our politicians, Biden, Kamala Harris, Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, what the hell do they know? What do they see about the future? Sweet F all. And the other thing you gotta think about, Paul Harvey's broadcast, and there's another brilliant one coming up. When he was making those, he was broadcast on over 1,000 radio stations and 400 military radio stations. Alexa, how many radio stations was Paul Harvey broadcasting on?
Paul Harvey was an iconic voice in radio, with his Paul Harvey News and Comment show broadcasting on 1,200 radio stations, 400 American Forces network stations, and 300 newspapers.
Thank you. So how the hell did we, the people, go from, being happy and moving forward to this bullshit world now where if you want to change your gender, go right ahead. Then you can go swimming in swim meets and win, and you can be so proud. You can enter all kinds of stuff once you gender yourself as that, and you're safe. Nobody can say anything, because if they do, it's a hate crime. It's a hate crime. It's a hate crime. And then they get arrested. Yeah, it gets to the point where you just say, who gives a shit? So much beauty in our world, and almost like a handful of individuals, non-governmental, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, there are a bunch of them around, who are deciding your future. They're not politicians. Nobody elected them. Nobody said, oh, Jesus Christ, things are so bad. I want Bill Gates and, who else? Name a bunch of billionaires setting out their life for the future. Oh, that's so cool. Surrender our freedoms.
Over what Israel is doing to Gaza and describing it as genocide. Now, for the descendants of those who were the victims of the Holocaust, and in this Ras Siegel's case, people who actually are experts in this area, to be describing what Israel is doing as genocide really gives you some indication of the barbarity, the savagery, the brutality of what they're doing. And yet, Europe continues and has continued to actively support the Israeli state in developing, sustaining, researching the military means through which they are visiting this genocide on the Palestinians and ethnically cleansing them. I got a very good paper from the Transnational Institute citing the details of some of this. The European Association Agreement has seen €46 billion of trade between Israel and the European Union. Israel has got 1,661 grants totaling 1.2 billion in the Horizon 2020. They're also involved in Horizon 21 to 27. This includes money to go for national security studies. It includes money going to the military and strategic affairs for Gabi Saboni, who is its director, who's the one who's developed and advocated for the use of overwhelming and disproportionate force to be used against civilian populations, and so on and so forth. Don't you think it's time to end European subsidies to the apartheid state committing genocide against Palestinians?
Thanks. Again, I want to thank deputies for the questions. Just in relation to the whole question of foreign policy, the European Union doesn't have a single foreign policy. And each member state has its own foreign policy, and that's very evident when you look at different positions and different actions by the 27 member states, depending on the case. We try from time to time on a case-by-case basis to have a common policy. We've done that fairly successfully in relation to Ukraine, but there are dissenters like Hungary, for example. When it comes to Israel-Palestine, I think it's going to be very difficult because different countries are coming from very different perspectives when it comes to this issue and it comes to this conflict. We were able to agree compromise language, and that was the basis of the European Council statement there the weekend before last, and we will try to do the same, I think, over the course of the next 2 days. And I'm sure on Thursday and Friday in Brussels, we will discuss cooperation with Israel. And at the moment, as we all know, there is very strong support for Israel from most EU member states. But that could change, and that will depend on how Israel acts in the coming weeks and months. And I think President Biden described it very well. He said the events of October 7th in Israel was their 9/11. They were attacked, civilians were killed in huge numbers, and it came as a huge shock and huge trauma to the Israeli population. But the point that he made, and I think it was a very valid one, he said to Israel not to make the same mistakes that the US made. And I think it's very clear what he meant, because the US made terrible mistakes after 9/11, which caused a lot of hurt in a lot of parts of the world. And I think impacted on their influence. And I think the point that President Biden was making to Israel, if you read between the lines, was a message of restraint, and one that we will be making as well. Just in terms of international law, our view as the Irish government is that collective punishment, deliberately targeting civilians and targeting civilian infrastructure are breaches of international humanitarian law, no matter who does them, and we've been very clear and consistent on that. I can't speak for the President of the European Commission or other member states, nor would I, but I do understand that other member states come from different perspectives. And let's not forget why so many European Jews had to emigrate to their ancestral home in Palestine, in Israel. It was because of what was done in Europe, particularly the Holocaust. And a lot of countries feel historic guilt because of their involvement in that. And we have to understand that. And we also have to understand that when it comes to extremist Islamic terrorism, the supernova event in Israel wasn't the first concert to be attacked by Islamic fundamentalists. Let's not forget what happened at the Bataclan in Paris. Let's not forget what happened in Manchester. Other countries come from a different perspective on this.
Let me begin by being absolutely clear. Canada, unequivocally and in the strongest possible terms, condemns these terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We stand with Israel and reaffirm our support for Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law.
Now then, what makes a nation strong? Taxes? There's nothing new about those either. The first income tax was paid by Abraham. It was written on a rock by the hand of divinity and handed to Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. And you might want to remember this. It was at the flat rate of 10%. It promised the wrath of God on anybody who tampered with or violated that law. Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. Joseph was a relatively well-to-do landowner of the house and lineage of David. Yet the taxes exacted by Caesar Augustus were so exorbitant that he didn't have enough money left over to employ a trusted messenger for the mission, so though his wife was great with child, he made the journey himself. And Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. And Christ was born in a manger because there was a housing shortage when he got there. Our problems are not new. At Runnymede, the Magna Carta was handed to King John on the end of a sword, denying to royalty the right of unlimited taxation. Yet you know it was for us, the American people, to become the first in recorded history ever voluntarily to surrender our rights to private property. Oh, yes, we did. With an innocent-sounding constitutional amendment, the 16th, which says that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, and we forgot to put any limit on the extent to which we could tax ourselves. Conceivably, we could be taxed out of all private property. We could be taxed not 70%, 80%, 90%, but 100%. We could awaken one morning and find that the government owns the farm and the house and the car and has a mortgage on the church, legally. Historically, whenever any nation has taxed its people more than 25% of their national income, initiative was destroyed and that nation was headed for economic eclipse. Presently, the American people are being taxed 33% of their total income. History says we'll roll forward on momentum for a little while, but we'd better get some more gas in the tank pretty quick. You see, ours is not the first by George good government to arise on the world stage. There have been several. Rome, Spain, and Greece, and China, and each enjoyed about 150 years at its zenith. That's just about our time in the New World. And then each decayed away. Not one of them was ever destroyed by anybody else's marching legions. Each rotted away, morally, socially, culturally, economically, simultaneously. You know, one of the most cruel paradoxes of history is this. Because each was a good government, it bore bountiful fruit. And when it bore bountiful fruit, the people got fat. And when they got fat, they got lazy. When they got lazy, they began to want to absolve themselves of personal responsibility and turn over to government to do for them things which traditionally they had been doing for themselves. At first, there appears to be nothing wrong in asking government to perform some extra service for you, but if you ask government for extra services, government, in order to perform its increasing function, has to get bigger, right? And as government gets bigger, in order to support its increasing size, it has to what? Tax the individual more. so the individual gets littler. And to collect the increased taxes requires more tax collectors, so the government gets bigger. And in order to pay the additional tax collectors, it has to tax the individual more, so the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler. And the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler, until the government is all-powerful. The individual is hardly anything at all. The government is all-powerful. The people are cattle. Now, some believe that the need is for a vigorous, strong man to arise on the scene, to regulate and regiment the affairs of men. Yet history tells us there have been several such. Once upon a time, there was a nation great and powerful and good. She was suffering from the aftermath of war, from a depression. And then came upon the scene a leader, an idealist, self-confident, intolerant of criticism. Wisely, he limited his early activities to combating the financial depression. Nobody could argue with that. But in a while, he began to regulate business and establish new rules to govern commerce and finance. Some of them in diametrical disagreement with the God-made laws of supply and demand, but anybody who disagreed with those new rules was promptly fired. The new leader saw that under the old system of free enterprise, landlords prospered, so he levied new taxes to take away their profits and destroy what he called the monopoly of capital. To please laborers, he controlled prices. To win the favor of the farmers, he gave them loans and subsidies. The national debt mounted alarmingly. Whenever anybody tried to tell him that governments, even as people, can go broke when they spend beyond their incomes, he said they just didn't understand deficit finance. What do you say? Did he build on rock or on sand? I say on sand. For you see, this was the story of Emperor Su Tongpo, who led China to its doom more than 1,000 years ago. I am satisfied with all my heart that if Uncle Sam ever does get whipped, here too, it will have been an inside job. It was internal decay. It was not external attack that destroyed the Roman Empire. Starting about 146 BC, internal conditions in Rome were characterized by a welter of class wars and conflicts, street brawls, corrupt governors, lack of personal integrity and moral responsibility. About 290 years after Christ, a Roman emperor named Diocletian took over. He really grabbed the bull by the horns. He took over in a period of turmoil and severe depression. The first thing Diocletian did was call in the gold and close the banks and raise the taxes. He reduced the power of the Senate, delegated its power to a lot of little government bureaus. Do you know they even had a Transportation Act back there prescribing the fee required to rent one laden ass per mile? And at today's rate of exchange, it would have amounted to about 1/8 cent per mile, which meant that in order to make a profit, a jackass would have to carry 5 passengers. That was simply beyond the capacity of the jackass. Diocletian put millions of people on the public payroll, but when this failed to do the job, the country was still in trouble. He asked more personal powers for himself. For a brief while, incidentally, they were standby powers, but then he used them all at once. He froze wages, he froze prices, he froze jobs, he stopped profits. He dictated to the farmer what he should plant, when and how he should sell it, and for how much, and he rationed food. And what happened? The labor market closed down. Incentive was gone. Farm life became dependent on bureaucratic red tape. Exorbitant taxes cost the farmer his land. He kept for himself only a small plot on which he might grow turnips for his family. He lost the rest of it to the state. And without food and with incentive gone, city life stagnated and declined. And Rome passed into what history has recorded as the Dark Ages, lasting 1,000 years. Just by turning to the left, the world has gone in circles. A nation would evolve from a monarchy into an oligarchy, from oligarchy to dictatorship, from dictatorship to bureaucracy, from bureaucracy to pure democracy, where finally the people would cry out from the chaos and confusion of the streets, "Oh, please, God, give us a king," and God would give them a king, and they'd have a monarchy again and start the whole silly cycle anew. Now, either we will profit from the errors of their ways, or it follows as the night the day, our children are going to have to relive the Dark Ages all over again. How come, after thousands of years of experiment, our new nation has come so far so fast? All this in less than 200 years. What is the secret of our success? Well, I think it had to do with a basic American's creed. Perhaps it never passed the pioneer's lips in this form, but if it had, I think he would have said something like this. I believe in my God, in my country, and in myself. I know that sounds like a trite, too simple thing to say, and yet it's a rare man today who will dare to stand up and say, I believe in my God and my country and in myself, and in that order. When the early American pioneer first turned his eyes toward the West, there were only Indian trails, or traces as they were called, for him to follow through the wilderness. Do you know today you can roller skate from Miami to Seattle? From San Diego to Plymouth Rock? In this little bitty instant, as historical time is measured, our 7% of the Earth's population has come to possess more than half of all the world's good things. How come? Well, sir, when that early pioneer turned his eyes toward the West, he didn't demand that somebody else look after him. He didn't demand a free education. He didn't demand a guaranteed rocking chair at eventide. He didn't demand that somebody else take care of him if he got ill or got old. There was an old-fashioned philosophy in those days that a man was supposed to provide for his own and for his own future. He didn't demand a maximum amount of money for a minimum amount of work. Nor did he expect pay for no work at all. Come to think of it, he didn't demand anything. That hard-handed pioneer just looked out there at the rolling plains, stretching away to the tall green mountains, and then lifted his eyes to the blue skies and said, thank you, God. Now I can take it from here. Well, that spirit isn't dead in our country. It's dormant. It's been discredited in some circles, driven underground, but it isn't dead. It's just that a few seasons ago, politicians baiting their hooks with free barbecue and trading a Ponzi promise for votes began telling us we don't want opportunity anymore, we want security. We don't want opportunity, they said, we want security. They said it so often we came to believe them. We wanted security. And they gave us chains, and we were secure. Suddenly, with our constitutional guarantees depleted, with our national character eroding away, with our tax laws penalizing those who dare to prosper, with workers concentrating on how little they can get by with instead of how much they can produce, suddenly we looked overhead one day to discover that the first tin moon in space was a Russian accomplishment. That free men dragging their feet had been outdistanced by slave workers dragging their chains. And we were sore afraid. Perhaps this was a disguised blessing, too. Maybe a dramatic accomplishment by this Cold War adversary was necessary to get us off our dead centers and back to work again. If we can revive in ourselves, then in our youth, something of that basic American's creed, the horizon has never, ever been so limitless. For man stands now on the threshold of his highest adventure of all, his first faltering footsteps into space. 20 years from today, half of the products you will be using in your everyday living aren't even in the dictionary yet. We've got it made. If we just keep on keeping on, we've got it made. And if we don't, we will follow those other great nation-states of history into the graveyard of ignominious oblivion. History promises only this for certain. We will get exactly what we deserve.